Stephen, I'm going to ask you if you can just introduce yourself and tell us what you do at Floreo.
Sure. Stephen Donaldson. I'm the Vice President of Enterprise at Floreo. And basically that means that all the sales, marketing, and the operations around the customer experience fall into my purview. So I've got a great team.
How does Floreo impact behavioral therapy?
What we know about ABA is that the best kind of intervention we can have is that early intensive intervention with lots of practice and lots of opportunities to shape on behaviors. And the trickier the behavior, or the more nuanced the behavior, the more sort of practice you need, and you have to control a lot of variables in the environment. That's what virtual reality is good at. It can create an environment in which people can practice, where all of those things that we have to worry about in the real world don't exist. Or if they do exist, they're at least controlled and manipulable by a coach or a therapist in real time. So, for example, if you have to teach a learner how to cross the street or interact with police officers, it's really hard to do that in real life. You have to find either an empty street, which doesn't seem very realistic and doesn't really train on what you're trying to train, which is watch for cars when there are no cars. Or if you want to interact with first responders, police officers, you have to find Confederates who are willing to participate in that over and over and over again, which even the best hearted of people might not have time to do that, right? They may really want to help, but they've got other things they have to do in their lives. So that's what virtual reality is good at. That's what makes it powerful. We can provide an experience where you can practice those things safely, repeatedly, controllably, and an expert, a therapist or a teacher or a coach can help the learner navigate in real time in making decisions, right? So listen to how they respond in virtual reality and actually see in real time what they're seeing, and then help guide them so that they're making the right decisions as they move through the lessons.
How does Floreo differ from traditional therapy?
So in traditional methodologies, we might sit at a table and go through flashcards or go through conversations, or just, that's how you do a lot of traditional therapy. I think a lot of learners find that boring and aversive. They just don't want to participate in that. Every clinician will tell you this is true, I think.
Yes.
So the more engaging you can make the practice, the better. And therapy really is, to me, therapy is not so much about the specifics of how you run the lesson, but it's about how you shape that behavior while you're in the lesson. So of course there's certain standards you want to adhere to, but the more engaging and fun you can make that lesson, probably the better responding you're going to get. And that's what we often hear about virtual reality.
What are the new developments at Floreo?
We are currently in closed beta testing for the Oculus, which will allow for peripheral controls. And that opens up a whole new world of interaction in the metaverse, right? So now you can actually see your hands and manipulate things in the environment, which helps with gross motor and fine motor skills. It helps, I think, immerse the learner even further into the world that they're in. Instead of just looking at a walk button and a crosswalk, you can actually press the button and sort of get practice with what that looks like, and maybe not feels like, because you're not actually pressing a button, but it's one step closer to that reality that you're going to have to practice in the real world.
How often do you update the software?
The beauty of the Floreo platform, at least in the structure of it, the engineering of it, is we can create new content really quickly. So if we have ideas, most of which come from existing users, have those ideas come to us, someone says, oh, I really need, a lesson on joining a conversation at a lunch table. Okay, great. Let's spin one of those up. And we can put the avatars that we already have in our sort of bank, and put them at a table and make it look like a cafeteria at a school, or put them in the park, or, those types of things.
Are you guys using telehealth?
As of the pandemic, early on in the pandemic, Floreo is a fully telehealth ready system. So you can be anywhere in the world and you can work with a learner anywhere else in the world, as long as you both have internet connection. It doesn't even need to be Wi-Fi. It can be as little as LTE on a cell phone. So you can still see what the learner sees in real time. You can guide them and coach them through the lessons. So that was a very powerful use case for us for telehealth. And thankfully, we're at least in some ways we're getting past the pandemic as far as the need to social distance quite as much. I mean, even the CDC has changed their regulations quite a bit around that. But there's still a very powerful use case for telehealth. If you have a learner who goes on vacation for 2 weeks, you can still provide programming for them while they're gone. It might not be with the same rigor that you would have as if, they were in a school or at home, but they get something while they're gone, right? They can participate in a meaningful way in a lesson, and you get to coach them and work on skills while they're away. If they move away and you want to keep working with them because you've developed a relationship, or the family has developed a relationship with you, they trust you, they really want you to keep working with their son or daughter or brother or sister or whoever, we can provide a way to make that happen. And it's much better and much more engaging than just a Zoom call would be.
Who are the staff working at Floreo?
Like, who do you have internally at Floreo?
Yeah, so we take that very seriously, the input that goes into design. So we have a content development team that is composed of an SLP with decades of experience. She actually was responsible for designing most of the programming in Floreo today. We also have BCBAs on staff full-time. We have consultant BCBAs who work, when they can. So they put in several hours a week helping us with various things, including content design, going through the lessons and making sure that they make sense from a clinical perspective. And some of those are school teachers who are BCBAs. Some of those are just the straight clinician that you imagine, just at a clinic that don't work in schools. Some work with adults, some work with early intervention cases. So we've really tried to find the spectrum of people who interact with the neurodiverse. Our chief medical officer is a neurodevelopmental pediatrician. So and he still practices at a hospital in DC. So he still does clinical rounds, still sees patients, is still very much immersed in that world. He handles a lot of the research that we do because we still participate in quite a bit of research with clinics and schools across the country. And we also have, very importantly, people who are on the spectrum who work at Floreo. So we've had everything from interns to self-advocates who help shape the way we think about autism and related diagnoses. So we feel like it's very important to give a voice to those that we're trying to help.
Anything else you want viewers to know?
Yeah. So I would say it's completely fair and reasonable to think about new technology as something that's distant and out of reach, but it's not. And what we have discovered is that even people who thought they'd never be able to figure out a virtual reality system, because that sounds like a scary technological, buzzword, we have found that even those people find that the user experience is pretty easy to navigate, and we've tried to design it in such a way that it feels more like you're providing therapy in the way that you're used to providing it. And we've designed it in such a way that is not cost prohibitive. So I think when people hear virtual reality, they think two things. They think, A, I'll never be able to figure it out, or it's too complicated, or I don't understand how it's going to fit in my practice. It's just foreign. I don't want to do that. Or they think, sounds really cool, but it's probably expensive, I think those are the two barriers that eliminate a lot of people from even giving it a try. And I would just encourage people to really take a look at what we have, because I don't think either of those barriers are true in our case. And we've taken a lot of pains to try and make sure that they're not true. So we want it to be user-friendly and useful and clinically appropriate and research-based. And we want it to fit alongside of your existing day-to-day practice and be a tool that you can use that will make your practice better and more efficient. And we also want to do that in such a way that it doesn't break the bank, to try and put in a new system like this. So of course there will be some cost, but we think that the provision of therapy that we can help people access, including lessons that were too dangerous or too expensive or too whatever, they were prohibitive for some other reason. If we can help you access those lessons and teach these learners valuable skill sets, we certainly feel like that's a valuable addition to any business.
I was at a session working with my client when the uncle came in and started asking lots of questions like, "What are you doing? What are you doing? What is this?" I explained that we are doing ABA therapy. He walked away and came back and asked if I was there to take his wife. I explained, "No, sir, I'm just here to work with your 8-year-old nephew." He paused and became agitated. He said, "No, I think you're here for something else." That's when I noticed he had a pencil in his hand. I got worried and took a step back as to not be within striking distance. But luckily, the grandmother showed up and told him to get out of here. He left, but I can still hear him mumbling things such as, "I'll never let them take me. You guys will never get me. I'll take all of you out." I managed to finish the session with the grandmother around, and after the session, I notified the office and filed an incident report with my ABA agency.
Do you have a story you'd like to be featured on Tales from the Field? Please email us at bxperspectives@gmail.com.
Okay. So right now we're going to be discussing the article called "Resisting Rewards When Treats Turn Sour." This article is very interesting because it's trying to make the point that rewards are actually bad for the child. So I'm not sure if that's accurate.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, Jennifer, the first thing I'll say is, having read this article and others like it, whether it's punished by rewards, unconditional parenting. I know there's this new trend right now that I've seen all over TikTok called gentle parenting. I think, unfortunately, there's a real lack of education surrounding what the behavioral principles and processes are that are going on here. When people are talking about extrinsic rewards ruining intrinsic motivation, what we're really talking about is transfer of stimulus control. Okay, we had kids who love to color in a preschool, and then all of a sudden we start giving them star stickers, and now that behavior is under the control of star stickers. And it's really interesting that all of these people write this kind of stuff, but they're not then willing to translate that. If they were saying, "Oh, hey, that's really the way this works," then as a society, a sophisticated society, we should get rid of money. Because we know it works. We know it's a motivator.
Right, right. In the articles, they say plenty of studies show that kids who are rewarded actually lose interest in the activity. So that can be kind of a misleading statement.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same thing. It's like, once it's under the control of, whether it's star stickers, money, any kind of tangible reward. And I think we need to also distinguish between reinforcer and reward. In terms of learning by consequences and operant conditioning, is that, yeah, just providing a bunch of pleasing things can have an abolishing effect. If they're getting a bunch of stuff for free, they're not going to be motivated to go get it. And when you pull the reward, that's what it was under the control of. So you're going to see a temporary extinction. And it's very likely that things like reinstatement will occur when they contact the natural reinforcing effects of the activity or the environment or whatever. But when they say many studies, I guess I would love to see those studies and how rigorous and scientific they were, because my guess is not very rigorous.
Yeah, I was in agreement in agreement with both of you, pretty much. Over here it says that although she says that she wants to foster internal motivation, and I like that, she's forgetting some parts like individuality and concepts such as pairing, where it makes it a little bit more complex for the student to go and learn and like a certain reinforcement. Like, we can't force some kid to suddenly gain motivation to certain to praise. Like, people don't just suddenly like praise unless it was paired with something, right?
Yeah, and actually praise, which she is suggesting, is actually a reward if the kid actually likes it. So yeah, I think the article is just really full of inconsistencies and misleading statements that, because if you guys saw the video, the host says that he has sticker charts for his family and ask her, is that bad? And she goes, oh yeah. So I don't know what he's supposed to do based off her advice with that, because she doesn't really give any concrete things that a person should do if they were to stop their sticker charts.
Yeah, and if I can hop in, I noticed in there as well that in the article, it's like, well, don't worry, like, trust me, it'll work when you remove this. And you can just say like, you're growing up and therefore these sticker charts are no longer needed. But I just think even just if you're going to take ABA and think of where that could be helpful here, or how we're going to take that lens and put that on this article. ABA is very individualized. However, there is baseline that goes into ABA. We're going to be looking at functions of these behavior to make sure that whatever we're working on, our proactive and reactive approaches are focused on the function of the behavior. So sometimes tangible rewards can be helpful when the function is access. However, when the function is escape or sensory automatic, like, that's probably not going to be an effective strategy, to her point. But I think that's something too, though, that with ABA, as far as the dissemination piece, when you go on this article, there's this 10 steps to like working with your child, or like, here's the 10 quick fixes. ABA doesn't necessarily have that. However, it is scientifically evidenced. It is individualized. So I think that is an interesting piece here as well.
Yeah, and to your point, Mallory, when they talk about numerous studies, I mean, we've got 60 years worth of data to suggest that these principles absolutely work. And to your point, when we fail to disseminate things about function, yeah, it's totally not going to work to just throw tangibles at everything. I have seen it. They make a good point. I have seen it where there's no satiation effects with token economies. We see that with billionaires. They just keep wanting more money. They get all the tokens, more tokens they could ever spend in their lifetime, and they keep going after more. But I think the biggest issue here is, when you have somebody, and this is something where ABA clinicians and therapists in particular need to be really careful. If somebody's already naturally motivated to do something, don't intervene. Don't put that under the control of something else. And to your point is, when we're not addressing function, we take something that was maybe automatically reinforcing and we put it under the control of a tangible, or we create and establish this multiply controlled scenario, whether it's attention or escape or other things, and then we start pulling those reinforcers, those rewards out. Of course, we're going to see a decline in the behavior. I feel like the star sticker study that everyone refers to, where they gave these preschoolers star stickers to color, then all of a sudden everybody was coloring. It sounded like, based on the description in the article that I read, that it turned into like a child sweatshop for coloring. And then when they pulled the star stickers, it stopped. And if anything, it was a better demonstration that the stickers worked as a reinforcer, rather than a demonstration that they ruined intrinsic motivation, because they didn't like follow those people through their lifetime to say, oh, they never colored again. We've ruined coloring forever. But we do know that can happen if you're not careful. And that's where not just the dissemination of science, but really careful practitioners need to come in and operate sensitively with the individual, rather than this one size fits all approach, which I feel like is where most of this stuff is coming from. Hey, here's a parenting philosophy. It's quick fixes. Everything's going to work. Just follow our stuff. And then when they don't follow it, they blame the parent. They say, well, you just didn't follow it closely enough. That's on you.
Yeah, so but I can empathize with the author who's trying to give parents that quick fix, and are we as behaviorists saying there's no quick fixes, hire a behaviorist, spend 15 hours a week with, the behavior. So what is the average parent to do if they wanted something that's going to work with their child, if anything? Or is it, no, you got to do a full-on assessment?
I like the when and then routine she's referring to, right? It's similar to the Premack principle, and that's she's promoting some easy to do things, but the thing is here is that she's forgetting certain steps in order to you know to get there. Like for example, she's using an example of like a family dinner, right? Or playing with friends or enjoying the TV time. And she's saying that isn't reward, but in a sense it is, and it also depends on how the family follows through with that, because that's an issue. A lot of the times we deal with families who say they're gonna go to, like, oh yeah, let's have dinner together at McDonald's or some their favorite spot, and then they don't do it because it's too much work for the family, or they don't have time for it. And now, like, that's going to cause some kind of distrust, and it's actually going to make things worse. See, like, it's again, there are certain steps to get there, or pairing and stimulus control. There's certain things that this article doesn't cover, that again, quick fixes won't always just work, right, in our field. So
Yeah, to your point, NJ, I feel like it would be interesting to challenge the author, or other authors out there who talk about this kind of stuff. Like, oh, why do you think the when then works? We know as behavior analysts, because we know Premax, we know response deprivation hypothesis. We know these things are important. But to your point, Jennifer, I feel like this is more of what Mallory was talking about earlier, of a dissemination issue. The answer is, do they need 15 hours of services for X number of years to see behavioral change? No. I mean, we have beautiful things like rule governed behavior, but without dissemination surrounding function, what reinforcement is, how punishment works specifically, I feel like all these fads, these parenting fads and random philosophies would go away, and we would come to a better communal understanding of how behavior works. And I know that that's what Skinner hoped for. I know that that's what other people like J.R. Cantor were hoping for, a more scientifically oriented and based society. I mean, that's what Walden 2 was about. We look at this stuff. If we had better dissemination, I don't know, Mallory, what you think about that. I feel like we wouldn't be running into these issues or having these conversations.
Yeah, I think also just a lot of the verbiage that she's using, it's very palatable. I know with ABA, we have a lot of jargon, and hopefully podcasts like this is helping to kind of give some more understanding to what these concepts are, because there are a lot of things like what you're saying, NJ, like Premax principle, and like those things aren't that challenging to implement in day-to-day life. And I assume a lot of parents maybe even are, and they don't even realize that that's something that they're doing. So I don't think necessarily that assessment in 15 hours and, all of that is, needed. But as ABA practitioners and lovers of the science, we have to do better at explaining what we're doing, and why this is super important work, because it is evidence-based and it works.